My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 68 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew what rock bottom looked like. I was wrong. Let me start from the beginning, when my world was still intact. For 32 years, I lived in a beautiful Victorian home on Maple Street with my husband Robert and our 2 children, Daniel and Patricia. Robert worked as a financial consultant. I taught piano lessons from our sunroom. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Happy, I thought. The cracks started small. Robert became distant around our 25th anniversary. Late nights at the office, weekend conferences. I told myself it was just his career demanding more attention. Patricia was finishing law school. Daniel was building his construction business. They seemed supportive of their father, always taking his side when I expressed concern. I should have seen it coming. One Tuesday morning, everything shattered. I returned home from grocery shopping to find Robert, Daniel, and Patricia sitting at our dining room table with the lawyer, the very table where we'd celebrated birthdays, holidays, and ordinary dinners for 3 decades. Robert's voice was cold, clinical. He wanted a divorce, but that wasn't all. They'd been planning this for months. Daniel's construction business was failing, drowning in debt from bad investments. Patricia's law school loans were crushing her. And Robert had found someone new, a woman named Jennifer, 20 years younger and pregnant with his child. My children had made a choice. They sided with their father, who promised to help them financially if they supported him. The cost? Me. They accused me of things I never did: emotional abuse, neglect, creating a toxic home environment, lies built on lies, documented carefully to paint me as an unfit mother, an unreasonable wife. The manipulation was surgical. The house was in Robert's name, a detail I'd never questioned after he insisted on handling all our finances. Within 3 weeks, I was served with divorce papers and an eviction notice. Robert had hired expensive attorneys. I had none. I lost everything: the house, my savings, which Robert had slowly drained through hidden accounts, my children, who looked through me like I was a stranger, even my piano, which Patricia claimed had been a gift to her. The judge was sympathetic but bound by law. I walked away with 1 suitcase and $700. For 2 months, I lived under the Morrison Street Bridge. The first week, I couldn't stop crying. I'd wake up on cardboard, smell the dampness of the concrete, and wonder how Margaret Hayes, piano teacher and mother, had become this invisible woman the world stepped around. There was a small community under that bridge. Thomas, a veteran with kind eyes and a guitar missing 2 strings. Sarah, a young woman escaping an abusive relationship. Marcus, who'd lost his job and then his apartment in the same devastating month. They shared their food with me, taught me where the safe shelters were, which streets to avoid at night. Thomas would play his broken guitar, and sometimes I'd hum along. In the darkness of that place, I found unexpected humanity. But my body was giving up. I'd always been strong, but living on the streets ages you rapidly. The exhaustion went bone deep. I caught a respiratory infection that wouldn't clear. Some nights I'd fall asleep wondering if I'd wake up. Then came the day that changed everything. I was dozing against the concrete pillar one afternoon, feverish and weak, when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 40 years. Margaret Ann Hayes. I opened my eyes to see a woman in an elegant cream coat and silk scarf staring down at me. Her silver hair was perfectly styled. Her face, though lined with age, was unmistakable. Catherine, my younger sister. We'd lost touch after a bitter argument at our mother's funeral. I'd accused her of being selfish with the inheritance. She'd accused me of being self-righteous. 40 years of silence followed. I'd heard through distant relatives that she'd moved to California, married well, started some kind of business, but we never reconciled. Catherine? My voice came out as a whisper. Her face crumpled. She knelt down on the dirty concrete in her expensive coat and took my hands. They were trembling. What happened to you? I told her everything. The divorce, the betrayal, my children's choice, the systematic dismantling of my life. She listened without interrupting, tears streaming down her face. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised me. I'm sorry, Margaret, for everything, for our fight, for not reaching out, for letting 40 years pass because of pride. She squeezed my hands. But that ends today. You're coming with me. Catherine owned a software company in Silicon Valley. She'd built it from nothing, became wildly successful, and never remarried after her husband passed 15 years ago. She'd been in town for a business conference and decided, on impulse, to drive through our old neighborhood. She'd seen me under the bridge and almost convinced herself it couldn't be her sister. But something made her stop. She took me to a hotel that night, a real bed, a hot shower, a meal I didn't have to scavenge for. I cried in that bathroom for an hour, washing away 2 months of dirt and despair. The next morning, Catherine made me an offer. She owned a beachfront condo in Santa Barbara that sat empty most of the year. I could live there. She'd also transfer $5 million into a new account in my name. Enough to rebuild my life, find good lawyers, and never depend on anyone again. I couldn't speak. I just held my sister and sobbed. You saved me once, Catherine said quietly. When we were kids, and Dad was drinking, you'd hide me in your room, tell me stories until he calmed down. I never forgot that, even when we were fighting. Let me return the favor. 2 weeks later, I was living in Santa Barbara. The condo overlooked the ocean. I could hear waves from my bedroom. Catherine hired a lawyer, a shark of a woman named Gloria Chen, who began building a case to reclaim some of what Robert had stolen. But I wasn't ready for revenge yet. First, I needed to heal. I spent mornings walking on the beach, afternoons reading in the sunshine. I saw doctors who treated my infection, my malnutrition, the damage from sleeping on concrete. Catherine visited every few weeks, and slowly, carefully, we rebuilt our relationship. We talked about our childhood, our mother, the argument that separated us. We forgave each other. 3 months after Catherine found me, I felt human again, strong again, and finally, I was ready to face what came next. Daniel called first, then Patricia, both within days of each other. They'd heard I was in California, living comfortably. Suddenly, they wanted to visit. They had flowers, apologies, but their eyes gave them away. They looked around the condo, calculating its value. They asked casual questions about Catherine's business, about my situation. They never once asked how I'd survived those months on the street. When Daniel hugged me goodbye, he whispered, "I'm glad you're okay, Mom. We should stay in touch. Family is important, right?" Patricia squeezed my hand. "We made mistakes, but you're doing well now, and that's what matters. Maybe we could help each other." I saw through them immediately. So did Catherine, who'd stayed for their visit. After they left, my sister looked at me. "They want money." "I know. What are you going to do?" I thought about it for a long time. About the woman I'd been under that bridge. About Thomas and Sarah and Marcus, still living there because they didn't have a millionaire sister to rescue them. About the months my children let me suffer while they enjoyed the money their father gave them for betraying me. "I'm going to teach them something," I finally said. Over the next few weeks, I let Daniel and Patricia back into my life. Slowly, carefully, I listened to their financial troubles. Daniel's business was still struggling. Patricia had credit card debt she couldn't manage. Robert had stopped helping them once the divorce was finalized, having gotten what he wanted. They needed money. They came to me with elaborate stories, justifications, even more apologies. I played the role of the forgiving mother beautifully. I told them I understood, that family was complicated, that I didn't blame them for choosing their father during a difficult time. Then I made them an offer. I'd invest in Daniel's business, pay off Patricia's debts. But first, I wanted the truth, a full confession, in writing, about what really happened, about how they'd fabricated stories to help their father, about the planning, the lies, the deliberate cruelty. For my own healing, I explained, I need to understand everything so I can truly forgive. They hesitated, but desperation won. They each wrote detailed confessions, explaining how Robert had orchestrated my destruction, how they'd participated willingly for financial gain, how they'd lied to lawyers in the court. I recorded our conversations where they admitted even more, their voices explaining how they'd stolen family heirlooms and sold them, how they'd laughed about me being homeless, how they'd never planned to reconcile until they learned about Catherine's money. With everything documented, I went to Gloria Chen. She smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. We filed lawsuits against Robert for financial fraud and hidden assets, against Daniel and Patricia for elder abuse and conspiracy. The confessions were devastating evidence. The recordings were damning. But I did something else too. I established a foundation with $2 million, the Morrison Street Bridge Foundation, dedicated to helping homeless families. We built a shelter, hired counselors, created job training programs. Thomas became our first employee, teaching music therapy. Sarah got her own apartment and started college. Marcus managed our outreach program. I didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted justice, and I wanted something good to come from all that suffering. The lawsuits took a year. Robert lost his financial consulting license and most of his assets. Jennifer left him when the money disappeared. He tried to reconcile, sent me letters full of apologies and excuses. I never responded. Daniel's business was seized to pay damages. Patricia lost her law license before she even started practicing. They both sent desperate messages, begging, pleading, claiming they were sorry, that they'd been manipulated, that they loved me. But I'd heard their voices on those recordings. I'd read the written confessions. I knew the truth. I didn't forgive them. Maybe someday I will, but not yet. Today, I'm sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset over the Pacific. Catherine is visiting tomorrow. We're going to cook dinner together, something we haven't done since we were girls. The foundation is expanding to 3 more cities, and I'm finally, truly, at peace. Sometimes people ask if I'm angry, if I'm bitter about what happened. The truth is more complicated than that. I'm grateful, not for the betrayal or the suffering, but for what came after, for finding my sister again, for learning who people really are when you have nothing to offer them, for discovering my own strength, for the chance to help others who are living under bridges, invisible to the world. My children made their choice. They chose money over love, comfort over character, and in doing so, they lost something far more valuable than what they gained. They lost me, not the homeless woman under the bridge, not the victim they created. They lost the mother who would have loved them unconditionally, helped them genuinely, and stood by them through anything. That loss is theirs to carry. As for me, I'm rebuilding, not the life I had, but something better, something honest, something earned through survival and grace and unexpected second chances. Catherine says I'm stronger than she ever was. I don't know about that, but I know I'm stronger than I thought I was, stronger than my children believed, stronger than Robert assumed, and that strength came from the darkest place I've ever known. Some bridges you burn, some bridges you sleep under, and some bridges you build between broken pieces of yourself, connecting who you were with who you're becoming. I'm still building, and for the first time in years, I'm excited to see what comes next. A